Cryo has always been one of the funnest elements in the entire Borderlands series, and in Wonderlands it's no different. Not only reigning king in terms of damage, as well as utility, the fact that it can lock enemies down is endlessly useful, and to cap it all off, we have a variety of spells to tear through enemies with, and they're all a lot of fun. With this build, that's what I aim to do, is empower you guys with all of the ice spells you've both seen, and maybe never seen before, as well as amplify it to the absolute utmost. This can absolutely crater Chaos level 50 with ease, and of course this build is packed to the absolute gills with a ton of spells. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, what you've been seeing before your eyes is Cocytus. Lovely name suggested by one of our lovely viewers. Frozen lakes of hell, tears from Satan, all that whole Cocytus weird myth of... Yes, also if you watched Overlord would accept that as you knowing that name. Sorry, I don't want to weird too many people out. I digress. Ladies and gentlemen, Cocytus is king of ice. This is of course spell shot mixed with berserker, harmonizing the weakness factor that berserker's first two skills can get, basically weakening enemies by an staggering amount whenever they are cryoed, as well as increasing cryo effect damage, so it just perfectly harmonizes. As well as we're finally able to dip into the capstone of spell shot, which I've always neglected because you can kind of just get a decent roll with cooldown and kind of always have your spells. But it is kind of nice being able to mess with new weapons because you kind of need to use gun damage in order to actually proc this reset. And also we can go for some bigger damage spells because our spells are basically always coming back instantaneously, which is really fun as well. You're never stuck in the hellish cooldown nightmare. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no doubt you've seen some of the spells that you're seeing before you, and we'll go through all of the spells that I have in the save file for you in a minute, but I did want to talk you guys ear off about the pain in the absolute ass that is balancing in this game. So one of the coolest parts of the build is basically this spell that I've never really seen a lot, and I didn't think it was that good, but turns out if you scale up everything a hell of a lot, anything can become good. This is called Storm Tornado thing. So basically it's a spell where you apply a whirling tornado that absolutely shreds things. Now, you know it's funny, we just made a build all about ability damage and the Spore Warden's full-on action skill, which has a incredibly long cooldown, but it still was shit. It was terrible. But this spell, baby, spell damage is the gateway to power. Yeah, we know this story, we've seen it before. Rant over. But yes, this thing absolutely bodies things. It's fantastic. You cannot have two that persist in the world at once though, even though I'm pretty sure you probably could get an extra projectile in it, and that might allow you to have two procedurally generating within the world at a time. Otherwise, basically use it and let it go away and then use it again. Don't just keep spamming it, although you do get a lot of impact damage. But the other thing I try to do with the build is show you guys a lot of repeating cast abilities, which, by the way, for ice, a lot of it's less AoE based, but damn well high target DPS based, meaning you can drop most things that you end up contacting with, as well as there is this other spell that I'm pretty sure not a lot of you guys have messed around with, but it basically is a prefix of the ice spell that can splinter off and is basically like auto-targeting to enemies. And not only does it auto-target, but it bounces between targets kind of like Jacob's Ricochet, except you can hit the ground in front of you completely missing, and then these rocket things will just fly into enemies. It's beautiful and chaotic and oh damn powerful. And honestly, I'd say just because ice is in such a crazy state that this is probably the strongest build we've made in a while, even though a lot of the spell builds are just kind of innately godly. But I won't hold you up too much. Here's a quick TLDR of what the hell is going on with the build. Nothing too much is crazy changed, except for Berserker basically being what we're using to build off of instead of Graveborn, as well as a bunch of new spells to showcase. So onward and upward, me in the future, take it away. And alas, here we are in the explanation part of the video. What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Let me show you guys everything that this build has to offer in terms of the new spells that I'm going to be giving you, as well as these. These are the ones you probably haven't seen too much of, and they absolutely wreck, which is perfect. So if you've seen our other builds like Torrent or Blood Witch or anything like that, of course spell shot is just great damage amplification, especially if you're able to increase your spell shot power rating. That is just amazing. But alas, the only thing that we basically changed is that we went deeper into the spell shot skill tree, because there's not a lot to be gained deeper into the Berserker skill tree, although there is a lot to be gained right here. These two skills, specifically this one, and this one, all feed into Cryo extremely well, hence Berserker. Specifically, this skill right here, giving us a 60% damage bonus to all enemies. That is mental. Not only that, but 20% more frost damage, and of course easier to make enemies completely locked up and in a cryo state. Immensely amazing, as well as some good movement speed is always nice as well. And not only that, we are taking all of our shield and of course pushing it into our health, which is giving us a lot of shield and a lot of health. You guys will see that in a moment. And the reason why that's also nice, because we're building for health and shield, is because we're healing with various things, but also we are getting a lot of shield every single time we activate a Furior Chuck. Essentially, we're going to be healing a lot because we have such a high reload speed. That's going to be happening really quickly. Anyways, as far as what we picked right here, essentially all that's new is of course double knot. Kind of nice. It's going to give our bullets damage and all this weirdness. It's okay. Then we also have this. This is actually pretty good. Gives a little more gun damage to build for as well. And lastly, we have this. This is the big poo, but this is only 5-second cooldown and has a 15% chance to erase all cooldown entirely. So it's going to give you max charges. So you kind of want to look for something with more charges and a higher cooldown rate. Offload it with better damage, stuff like that. But anyways, in regards to the skill we just talked about, this is the bread and butter what we're going to be using. Now, yes, this is a pixie, but it is also not considered spell damage. Fear Not specifically are considered spell damage, which is what this is. Also what this is. So yeah, this thing counts as gun damage and will be able to trigger and does an amazing job at triggering this. It also counts as gun damage, so it's going to trigger any sort of gun damage activation stuff you have as well as that's why we bought this. It's going to kind of level out our spell damage to our pixies, Fear Nots, to our just normal SMGs, and also that way you can literally chuck your pistols until you absolutely bottom out, and you'll still have another weapon that can chew through enemies, and I mean chew through enemies. Also, you can use things like liquid cooling, albeit not as good as this, which, yes, is insane. As far as our gear, nothing much has changed. We're still rocking the Goblin Pickaxe just to give us some more cooldown, and just because that's our main damage type, the quicker we can get back to that, the better. Also, I left a Dark Magic so that when you hit something, you have a chance of healing through it, which is quite nice. As far as our class prefix we're using Tides, of course, because we're buffing our frost damage to any enemy that's soaked, and every enemy is going to be soaked almost instantaneously, so lovely. Of course, we have this, which is basically going to give us exponential more damage to our companions, which I do believe Fear Not pistols and SMGs count for. But if you want to use something else, another great pick is this. Just the ability to slip and slide everywhere is fantastic, and it's actually just kind of a nice quality of life thing because you actually don't need that much more damage. We're just going to quickly go by and break down all of the spells, but I would highly suggest that you keep your right hand in something that is basically quickly expended and provides a lot of continual value gain. So this one is absolutely amazing. The storm that kind of follows you, this ice storm that will move around and track enemies. Granted, you can only have a couple of them out at once, so be careful with that. You can't just spam it back to back. Buffmeister is fantastic, but the one that I also think is fantastic is a Hydra. Considering we're not going down Graveborn, you're going to miss your little lizard friends, and that is also a fantastic pickup. If I can find it somewhere here. I feel like I passed it. I did. Hydra. Yeah, it's also the good Hydra. Also, it's 3 charges, so you'll be taken care of essentially. And yeah, have this on your offhand. Cast this if you want. You can cast as many of these as you want though. So, and honestly, this is probably better damage because these things have like crazy range, and also they drop some stuff for you. Also, whenever they shoot stuff, they'll make more Hydras, and it'll be kind of like a bulldoze effect. And again, if you reset your cooldown whilst you have 3 active, then you can put another 3 down, and all of those Hydras are basically trying to stack on top of each other because when they deal damage, they have a chance of spawning another one. As far as the shield we're using, the reason why we're using this one is because we don't have that many ways to heal ourselves, and we're going to be killing things like crazy fast, so this perfectly sequences into this. I also wanted to change up the enchantments a little bit and give you guys a funner one to basically shoot another projectile, which is way more fun, and also it's up for a moderate duration, so this is actually up for a pretty long time. First things first, what was buffed by 200% in the last patch was this, the legendary spell Frozen Orb. This thing is absolutely cratered by this, which is a purple spell tornado with greater AoE and literally hunts enemies down and doesn't just go on a linear path. What the absolute hell? Twister is still absolutely cracked, so use it as you like. Now that we can reset our abilities, we can basically spam the ever-living hell out of that. Now, a lot of you have seen this before. Quick cast, a fistful of eyes just wrecks people, right? Well, that's pretty good, but what is shockingly good is this. Repeating cast, it's the same pretext, but repeating cast in terms of damage is so much better, and you basically, it's times 4 because you get 4 extra shots. And this one is what I would honestly suggest keeping in your left hand. This thing will just melt bosses. Also, you can basically sniper shot somebody, and it's so much better.
The ricochet version is better.
So both of these are good options. Again, this is good if you're really wanting to use this, and this is good if you want to use stuff with lower cooldown, by the way. So this is higher cooldown, this is lower cooldown. The reason why is because this is considered a gun and can just erase the cooldown altogether, but also this scales off of spell damage and will melt things just by itself. So you can kind of be hella optimal with that, and as long as you're not super spammy, you can get by. But anyway, and of course I brought this one back, repeating cast. You can just output a ton of little shards that absolutely melt. And of course we have this, which this is a good old faithful. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember it. This one, I don't know what happened, but it didn't scale as hard. It was really good beginning of the game, but is okay at this point in the game. But it's still pretty good if you stick a lot of sticks on a couple enemies, they get melted. But to be honest, it's cratered by the 2 at the end that I'll show you, which I've already showed you one of them. But anyway, and of course meteorites need no introduction. I gave you guys kind of almost every pretext, I believe: slow fall, multi-meteorite, and double multi-meteorite that goes faster. This one's probably just the best, all like meta-wise. And lastly, we have this. This is probably one of the best ones in the game. I'd say this is probably the best one in the entire spell range of Cryo that nobody has talked about, but the fact that these can ricochet, that you can't miss, and that you can have repeating cast versions of that is just nuts. Also, one thing we missed: it cannot have an ice bill without the ever-present and lovely Glacial Cascade, which is just an absolute monster and is so fun, but is kind of fucked up for those airborne enemies. But of course, that's what this is for. You can just keep holding these down and they'll keep ricocheting everywhere. Now, as far as the best combinations to go with, these are my favorite. Storm Calm, which is this, and then of course just laying into enemies while you're shooting them like this, and then keep throwing, and again at that point they should be firing and they'll reset your skills. You can fire another one of those, and at that point you'll be able to lay into them with more of those ricochets. That's fantastic. This one right here, the hold down, just keep chewing through enemies, that's awesome as well. And then of course I would couple it with Hydras because it just sequences so well, especially with resetting your entire cooldowns. Fantastic.
Also, I didn't think it needed to be said, but Buffmeister makes your gun you're using like a literal bullet hose. Like, try that out for the love of God. It's probably one of the funnest, craziest, nonsensical things ever. It'll also make your spells melt, because of course it does. It's Buffmeister, kill me anyways.
As far as skill point acquisition, you can kind of spread it where you want. You can put it into wisdom if you want. I don't think we need that much in cooldown, especially now that we're going down the skill tree that is like this, to get the capstone of spell shot. Also, one thing I will mention, I gave you guys kind of a slew of different types of spells. Some are repeating cast, some are cast, which is just like you cast one handful and it's done. But thank you so much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Also, we will cover the absolute hell out of this game. Whenever there is content, I will come running. So I appreciate anyone who subscribes to be with us on this journey, as well as when other games come out to catch our interest. We'll cover those to bits as well. Thank you kindly for your time. There is a still build really close along the horizon. It's our fire version of all of the loveliness that exists within fire spells, which there are a lot and they are crazy, so I cannot wait to show you guys those.
Also, the reason why I gave you the dark magic pixie is because whenever you fight an enemy that's immune, you can still eviscerate them, given you have bullets, and you should. Alright, yeah, I didn't say goodbye. Subscribe if you're into it. Bye.